Welcome to the channel, everybody. This is my introduction to programming video. Got one slide for you to start with, and then we're going to jump right into some example code, some example logic that we'll review line by line and kind of do some demonstrations of some concepts. So regardless of whatever language you're choosing to start with, my opinion is what you need to start learning first and get your head wrapped around is the idea of variables, constants, and data types. So this is something that you're going to use all throughout any program that you deal with. You're going to need to save values and data inside of your program. Sometimes you're going to need to change, the values that you're using and you're working with, right? And where you're going to store these things in is called a variable. So that's why I got my definition is a container for storing a value that can change, right? That's a variable. We're going to see it in just a minute. The opposite of a variable is a constant. So this is something you define usually at the top of your program, and it never changes throughout the program. It keeps that value. So it's the opposite of a variable. And then the third thing is data types. So this is where you tell what type of value you're going to store inside the container, be it the variable or the constant or whatever it is. There are different types of data types. Like if you're going to store words, then that would be like a string value. If you're going to store a number, there's all different types of number data types, like an integer or a real. There's just a lot of different data types for numbers. And then if something maybe is only true, false, then that would be like a Boolean data type. So that's enough PowerPoint. Let's jump into some code. Let me zoom in just a little bit. Try to make that easier to see. Maybe one more time. Alright, so this is VBScript. I picked VBScript to start with because it doesn't care about data types. Alright, VBScript in Python, you don't have to declare data types. A lot of other languages, you do. You have to specify what type of data you're going to store in the variable when you declare the variable. And a good practice is to declare your variable at the top of the program. That's what these first couple lines right here are. The dim is dimension. It just says I want to create a variable named value1. Like I said, this is VBScript. You can see up here in the extension for this script name is .vbs. And VBScript doesn't have data types, so to speak, like the other languages do. Everything's just considered a variant, which basically means it'll hold whatever you want. It doesn't matter. And you can change data types. So I can put a word in here, like a string in here. I can put text in here. I can change it to hold a number or whatever. And we'll do some of that. But basically, these first three are creating variables. I made these up. You can name it anything you want to. It doesn't matter. I would recommend choosing something meaningful to name it. You can name it something like a single letter, X or Y, but then when you get to using it in the program, you might not remember what you named it. All right, this line number 6 right here, constant. So this is something that I came up with. I named it threshold, but right here I declared it as a constant. And I assigned it a value of 10. So I said this constant named threshold equals a value of 10. So throughout this program, anytime I use threshold, like down here, you can see where it's highlighted, it will always have the value of 10. That cannot be changed because of this keyword. And I'm in Notepad++, this little application that you're looking at here, and it is, when I tell it it's a VBScript, it highlights the keyword. So anything in blue like this is a keyword that it's like a built-in word for this particular language. Alright, so we got our variables and our constant declared at the top. The constant has a value. The variables are basically just empty containers right now. Nothing has been assigned to them. So the first thing we're going to do here, what this program does, it just adds two numbers together, saves the answer in this variable here, And then we've got a simple if statement that's doing a comparison to see if whatever these two numbers add up to be, if they're bigger or smaller than our constant. So we need to assign a value to each one of our two variables. So that's what's going on right there. So we're storing the number 5 in this variable, number 6 in this one, and because of the plus sign, that's an operator. It adds value 1 and value 2. So it's going to add 5 plus 6. It's going to save that answer in this variable. So in this case it would be 11. So this if statement says, is 11 greater than threshold, which is a 10? And so it's going to get inside this if statement, and it just prints this line to the screen. So let's run that right quick so you can see it. There you go. 11 is greater than 10. So if we change this, let's change it to 3, save it. This time it's going to be 9. So it says 9 is less than 10. So when it hit this if statement, we had 9 was not greater than 10, so it entered this else clause. That's kind of what we just saw there. So let's demonstrate a constant. Let's try to change the value of this. So right up here we say it's a constant and it equals 10. Let's try to reassign it to 15, okay? I'm going to save it. I'm going to execute the script again. And if you look right here, it tells us line 8, it has an error, illegal assignment threshold. That's because it's a constant, right? It can never change values. It's declared at the top, assigned a value. We cannot overwrite or change that value anytime during the program. That's the difference between a constant and a variable. If it's a variable, we can change it all we want. So we can do this. It might be a little silly, but we can assign it 3 and then we can assign it 10 right after the fact. And so when it gets to this line 14, value 1, it's going to have the 10 because that was the last thing assigned to it. So we start out with a 3, then we assigned it a 10. So when we get to this addition right here, it's going to have 10 plus 6. So when we run that, it should say 16 is greater than 10. 16 is greater than 10. So just a simple demonstration of a variable. That's a container that can have a value that changes. A constant is the opposite. It's a container for something that never changes. Alright, so now that we've covered that, let's talk about the third thing, which was data types. And to demonstrate data types, I'm going to switch programming languages from VB Script to just Visual Basic, just VB. You'll see it's almost the exact same program as what we were dealing with, except I took away the if statement, and at the top when I declared these variables, I had to give them data types because VB requires data types. And since the program adds two numbers together, I need to deal with a number data type. Now there's several different data types for numbers depending on if you're dealing with a positive or a negative number, or how big the number is, or if it needs a decimal or something like that. But for these small numbers that we're dealing with no decimals, integer works fine, so that's what I chose to use. So all three variables are integers. Adding the two numbers together and then printing it to the screen basically. So let's run that. The two values equal 16. So 10 plus 6 equals 16, right? So let's change them from integers to strings. Let's see what happens. Now a string is considered text. different than a number. So typically when you think of strings, you're thinking of like letters, your ABCs, but it can hold a space or a number or whatever, but it's going to be handled differently. So let me compile it. This is VB. It's a little bit different than the VB script that I was dealing with, so I have to compile it every time I save it. So when I execute it this time, instead of 16, you can see we get 106 because I changed the data type from an integer to a string. It no longer considers them numbers, it considers them just characters. So this plus sign here on line 14 is no longer doing like math addition. It is what's doing concatenation, or it's adding two strings together. Adding is the wrong word. It's just putting two strings together. So it's literally printing 10 and then it prints 6 right behind it. So let's change this to say hello, put a space in there so it looks right, and then we do world. So this time it should say hello and a space, world behind it. So when we print, that's saved in sum, so when we print to the screen sum, this time, let me compile it, it should say hello world. The two values added equal hello world. So hopefully that's a good demonstration of the difference between, or the importance of picking the correct data types, because it handles things differently. As we just demonstrated, when we're dealing with numbers, if you assign it an integer, it handles it differently than if you assign the variable a string. Let's assign these as integers. We should definitely get an error because we're trying to store, words, ABCs, or characters in there. If we set these variables up as integers, this should make something throw an error. Let's see if it'll even compile. Here we go. Yeah, it actually compiled. But when we run it, there we go. We crashed it because we tried to put the wrong type of value into a variable. So right here our error, conversion from string to type integer is not valid. So the variable says it can only hold numbers, it can only hold integer values. We tried to put a string value into an integer, so it crashed. It did not like that. That's probably as deep as I'll go right now for data types. Drop a comment below if you like the way I explained it and you like the way I demonstrated. I'll do a whole video on just the common data types, but it could be like a whole 20-minute video just on that. So I don't want to get too deep into it now. I just wanted to make you aware of it. Aware that they exist and that they are important, to choose the right ones when you're writing your program, because it can handle things differently. It can handle the same values differently, just like we demonstrated with the 16 and the 106. So that's it for today. Hopefully you like the way I explain things. If you do, drop a comment below. Let me know what you'd like me to cover next. So thank you and bye.